You could have the best content strategy in the world, the clearest goals, the sharpest messaging, and the most consistent publishing schedule, but still not know if any of it is working because measurement is something that many B2B content teams struggle with. They're either measuring not enough or they're measuring too much and drowning in data. In this episode, the final part of our B2B content strategy series, we're going to look at how we can fix that. You're listening to the Content 10x podcast, where it's all about content repurposing. I'm Amy Woods, and I'm here to help you maximize your content and find smart ways to get your message in front of more of the right people, whilst also saving time. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to the Content 10x podcast. I'm your host, Amy Woods, and I'm delighted to share with you the 7th part of our B2B content strategy series. Now, if you've been following along, we've been covering so much valuable content over the last 6 episodes. We've looked at what a content strategy is. We've looked at how to align that to your business goals. Also looked at your core messaging and your positioning, the channels and the formats, and also repurposing and distribution as well, one of my favourite topics. And now we're going to get to the part of looking at measurement and KPIs, which tells you whether your content strategy is actually working. Because you don't want to be a busy fool creating lots of content and sharing it everywhere and not actually know if it's working and if it ties to those business goals that your content strategy supports. So that's what we're going to dig into in this episode. We've built the content strategy from the ground up through the last 6 episodes, and today we're looking at measurement, KPIs, and working out whether your content strategy is working or whether you need to make some changes. Before I jump to the main content, just to mention, why not take our B2B content operations benchmark? It's a free self-assessment. It should take no more than 4 minutes. You go through a series of quick-fire questions on content strategy and also your tech and your operations, your capability and your team and your culture. And then from that, you will get a personalised report to help you with your content strategy and operations. As I said, it should take no more than 4 minutes. So go to content10x.com/benchmark. Why not do that right now? Hit pause and then carry on with this episode of the Content 10x podcast. So as I said, this episode is about measurement and knowing whether your content strategy is working. So why is this important? Now, you could have created a fantastic content strategy and be really clear on your messaging and your channels and your formats and your audience and your competitor analysis and all of that. But if you don't have the piece where you look at how you're going to measure whether it's working, then as I mentioned earlier, you could be a busy fool. You could be creating so much content, but it does not make a difference in terms of the business outcomes that your content strategy supports. So why do we need it? Because we need to know that the content strategy is serving its purpose. So then the big question is, how do you know what you should be measuring as part of your content strategy? I'd like to refer you to episode 355 on the Content 10x podcast, which was part 2 of this B2B content strategy series, because we looked at understanding your business goals and understanding how your content strategy supports those business goals. So that should give you a really good, clear idea of what you should be measuring to determine whether your content strategy is working, because it needs to be impacting upon the business goals that you support. So that's a key indicator. What are the key business goals? And therefore work out the metrics from your content strategy that are going to impact upon those business goals. So for example, let's say that your content strategy is to support the main business goal at the moment, which is to increase brand awareness. Then the metrics that you may be looking at within your content strategy to see if that's working may be around the reach of your content and the impressions and the engagement. You may get that data from the social media platforms or the social tools that you use to post content. May also be from your website, from Google Analytics. It could be from the mentions that you hope to get as you increase brand awareness. Where do you expect to start getting mentioned? AI citation as well. So they're the kind of metrics that may support where the business goal is largely around brand awareness. That's going to be quite different if the main business goal that your strategy supports is to get people through to the consideration phase, so to get your audience from awareness to consideration. In that case, the kind of metrics that you may be looking at could be things like increasing your email subscribers and then also looking at those email open rates. Or let's say that you run webinars, then looking at webinar attendance rates. Or let's say you have useful lead magnets and downloads on your website, then data could be looking at how many people are signing up for those and getting those resources. So all the actions that show people go from being aware of who you are to getting more into that consideration phase. Or perhaps your content strategy is largely focused on conversion. And in that case, you'll be looking at increasing sales and pipeline and those key conversion statistics. Or maybe your content strategy is more in support of conversion. So in that case, you're looking at pipeline data and sales, and indicators there may be things like people booking in for demos, for example. So you have those lagging indicators, things like booking demos and the sales calls, etc. And then more leading indicators, which is the reach and the impressions and the content consumption. So when you're deciding what metrics are important, you want to be looking at, are you reaching the right audience? Are they engaging with your content? Are you sharing the content in the right format? So that will come through the engagement metrics if people are engaging with the right formats and on the right channels. And also, are people taking action off the back of that engagement as well? Another important thing to consider is there are going to be quantitative metrics, but also qualitative metrics as well. So quantitative will be more the hard, fast data. And then you've got the qualitative, which isn't always as easy to measure, but it's still really, really important. So make sure that you balance that quantitative and qualitative metrics and data. And then you also need to consider within that vanity metrics and value metrics as well. Don't get too focused on those vanity metrics. For example, perhaps you've got 10,000 impressions on a LinkedIn post, but that didn't really lead to anything. Yes, 10,000 people saw the post and maybe quite a lot of people engaged with it, but was it the right kind of people, and what was the engagement, and did anything meaningful actually happen from that, or was it just a vanity metric? Whereas perhaps you get less engagement and less impressions on a particular post, but what did happen was from that smaller number of people who did see that post and did engage, they went on and they booked sales calls or messaged you or booked in for a demo. So just make sure that you know that distinction between the vanity metrics that seem really nice, those nice big numbers, and actually the value metrics that truly make a difference. Value metrics are the ones that lead to outcomes. They tell you that you are creating content that is getting in front of the right audience, that the right people are engaging and taking action, and the value metrics directly impact upon the ultimate business objectives that your content strategy is supporting. And a really important way to test whether it's a vanity metric or a value metric is to look at, if that number goes up, does something important within the business that we care about, that the content strategy supports, also increase and go up at the same time? And then that will tell you that's a value metric and not a vanity metric. Now, can you measure too much? And the answer to that is you absolutely can. Now, just because something can be measured doesn't mean that you should measure it. You can end up drowning in so much information and so much data if you try to measure too much. But also on the other side of that, if something cannot be measured, that doesn't mean that you should not proceed on with it if it can't be measured or it's difficult to measure. Now, on my sister podcast, B2B Content Strategist, I had a great interview with Jason Widdup in episode 18 of season 3. And he talked about exactly that, where he said that it is really important for marketers to not get bogged down with attribution. Now, he actually said that when he takes on new roles within companies as a marketing leader, he will explain to the CEO that he's supporting that they need to be comfortable with the fact that 50% of what he does who will not be able to attribute data to. It will not be that easy to be measured. And it's really, really important that marketers are able to do that and able to have that freedom. Because if you only ever do what's measured, it's really going to restrict, experimenting and trying new things. And it's simply the case that some things that cannot be easily measured are still very, very important and should still be a focus and a key part of your content strategy. So just because something can't be measured doesn't mean ignore it, but also just because something can be measured doesn't mean that you should focus on it as well. You need to get that balance right. And it's always been quite challenging to prove and measure the ROI of content marketing. It's a little bit different to other types of marketing like advertising, paid social, PPC. But you need to be comfortable that just because it can be sometimes tricky with attribution when it comes to content marketing, it's building trust, it's building familiarity, and it's educating your audience at different stages of their journey. Now, throughout this content series, I've shared a house analogy where I talked about the content strategy being the blueprint to building a house. And then you have the plans, which is deciding, who's going to do what and when and cadence and things like that. And campaigns, which are short bursts of activity. So when we come to that house analogy and we're looking at measurement, let's say, for example, you're building a house and you've made a decision within that blueprint, the vision for your house that it's going to be energy efficient. So the measurement and KPIs will be things like installing thermostats and seeing the warmth of the house and looking at how much it costs, looking at the energy bills and things like that to see how much it costs to heat the house. And perhaps you discover that there is a particular part of the house, a particular room that seems, say, colder than the rest of the house and you're struggling to heat it. That data there that shows you that the temperatures are down or that it's costing more to warm that section of the house, that's going to tell you to look into this. And that might be that you need to put in another radiator, or you need to put more insulation into the wall cavity, or maybe there's a draft that you need to fix. You're not going to go and knock the whole house down because there's an issue in a section of the house that hasn't managed to meet your vision of energy efficiency. You've got that data that you can look at that particular part and look at how you can fix that. And that's what's so good about measurement within a content strategy as well. If you spot that something isn't working, you don't have to rip up the whole content strategy. You need to just look at what tactical changes you could make. So perhaps it's something to do with the platform that you're focusing on. Perhaps it's to do with the content formats on that specific platform, or maybe it's your messaging, your positioning. You need to change something within that and then measure and see if those changes have made a difference. So in the same way that we wouldn't knock the house down if one part of the house isn't showing that energy efficiency that we're aiming for, we wouldn't rip up the content strategy if something isn't working. We have the data that we can make some changes and see if those changes are going to impact upon that data and get us back on track with what we want to achieve with our content strategy. And it's really important to just make the point here that we're talking about a content strategy. So you have to be patient when it comes to content marketing. Content marketing isn't a quick fix and you don't see immediate results from content specifically. So you have to be patient and you have to be consistent. So just bear that in mind when you are looking at this measurement and attribution, that patience is really key when it comes to content marketing. But what do you do if you have been patient and you are reviewing your measurements and your KPIs and you feel that things aren't working? Well, I think you have to ask yourself the question, have you been consistent as well? Because quite often with the B2B marketing teams that we work with here at Content 10X, we sometimes find that consistency is a problem. And so they're ready to walk away from a particular approach that they've been following with their content marketing, but they haven't really been consistent enough. And that's what's playing a part in their KPIs not being where they want to be with that particular approach that they're taking. So do just check that you have shown that consistency. But if you have been consistent and you are just finding that things aren't working and you've been measuring and you're wanting to make a change, then you need to look at what the problem is there. Is it reach? Are you simply not reaching enough people with your content and you need to look at your distribution approach and how you are distributing that content to get in front of the right people? Or, for example, Is your reach good and you are getting out there and you are distributing and your content seems to be getting in front of enough people, but people are not taking the action that you need? In that case, perhaps this is an issue with resonance. Is it the topics that you're talking about? Do you need to look at your messaging? So quite often it's going to be one of those two things. It's going to be the distribution and the reach, or it's going to be the messaging and the pillars and the topics that you're talking about. Or it may be that you actually need to go right back to the start of the content strategy and look at your audience analysis, because you are reaching a lot of people and it does seem like the topics are correct that you're talking about, but there seems to be another issue, and that might be that you haven't got that quite right with the audience analysis. So the people that you're reaching just aren't quite the right people, and you need to go back to the competitor analysis and the audience analysis to be sure that you are focusing all your attention in the right places. Okay, so I hope you found this episode really useful. As I said, this has been part 7 of our B2B content strategy series, and we have built a content strategy from the ground up through this series. We started by looking at what a content strategy is. We looked at how to align that content strategy to business goals. We looked at competitor analysis and audience analysis, messaging and core positioning, also content formats and channels, of course, content repurposing and distribution. And in this episode, we've looked at measurement and KPI. So we've gone from what a strategy is all the way through to measuring it and making sure that it works and it is aligned with those core business goals that your content strategy supports. So I hope you found this really, really useful. Content strategy is great, but it can't just be theory. You need to look at how you can take that theory and put it into practice. And that's what's really, really important. So if you take anything away from this content strategy series that I hope you have found useful, I hope you've taken some actionable takeaways and things that you can do to really improve your content strategy. And if you would like any help with your content strategy, whether it's reviewing your existing strategy or helping you to develop a brand new content strategy, or indeed help with anything else in the B2B content marketing world, content creation, repurposing, distribution, we are here to help at Content 10x. So just head to content10x.com/inquiry and we would love to speak with you. And also, just to mention, if you haven't taken it already, then do go and take our B2B content operations benchmark. It's a free self-assessment. It shouldn't take any more than 4 minutes of your time. And you get asked questions that are quick fire on content strategy, your tech, your operations, your team, capability, culture, all of that. And then you'll get a personalized report to help you with your content strategy and your operations. So just head to content10x.com/benchmark and go ahead and take our content operations benchmark. So all that's left to say is thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Again, it's the last part of our content strategy series, so do make sure that you check all parts of the series. It's been fantastic to go on this journey with you. And all that's left to say is thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you in the next one.